Okay, so we're here to put some on-face controls on this. So we've set up our mouth emotion here, and we've got it doing its business. And I'll just zero that out. And what we want to do is whenever we automate something, we always want to, give the animator the ability to override it or counter animate it or, make adjustments. So we've got these sort of built-in automated blend shapes, and now we want to do on-face controls to give them the opportunity to, customize the animations going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating some clusters, and I'm going to work on this row right here. So all of my verts that I select are going to start on this edge loop that's going around. So it's just under this 2 5-point loops. So I'll start, I think, here. And then I'm going to go shift period, and I'm going to grow my selection once, twice, thrice. And what I'll probably do then is just remove the top row there. So I'm going to keep it kind of in this region. And then I'm going to go to deform, and I'm going to create a cluster. So there's my cluster, and then while the cluster is still selected, I'm going to go up to my display, transform display, and just turn on selection handles. Just in case I need to re-select this cluster, it's just easier with a handle on it. All right, so that's my first cluster. My second cluster, if I started on this point, what I need to do is I need to figure out where, let's go back into object mode. I'm just going to grab this cluster, deform, edit membership tool, and I'm not changing the membership. I just want to know where my last row is that I've assigned membership to this inner cluster. So we'll do the next cluster, which will be on this row. So I'm sticking with this row, and that's the first point after my last point. I do want to have some overlap, so I like to I hover my mouse there, I hit Q to exit the edit membership tool, right mouse click, vertex, and then just grab that vert, and then shift, period, 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 and that's a lot, so probably definitely get rid of these 2 rows, probably that row, probably out here as well. That's a pretty big swath. Sure, why not? Create a cluster, and then display, transform display, selection handles right away, and then deform, edit membership to figure out where my last row was. So that's my last row there. And again, it's this row here, so that's going to be the vert. So I'm going to go vertex, hit Q to exit my tool, select that vert, and then shift, period, period, period. And then again, just remove excess, probably this row here I don't need. Something like that. This is probably complete. I don't know. It's different than what I did in class probably, but hey, whatever. Okay, cluster. And then selection handle. And I'll just open the outliner, and this is going to be inner brow cluster, mid brow cluster, and outer brow cluster. Right, cool. So there's my clusters, and now I'm gonna go in and create a empty group, which just makes this null. And of course all new objects are down at the origin, so if I hit W, that's where it is. Now this is a null, has no shape node. You can't select it in the workspace, you can only grab it in the outliner, and I'm just gonna duplicate that twice because I want one for my inner brow master node, my mid brow master node, and my outer brow master node. And each of those is going to move to the vertex that I selected. So my inner brow is going to move to this point, right? This point, I don't remember. Let's put it here. Oh, it has to, you have to be able to move it all 3 axes. So right there. And then the mid brow goes, I think, right here. And the outer brow is like way over here somewhere, like there, I think. Cool. And then, of course, all three of those need to be frozen now that they've been positioned. And with all three of them as well, I'm going to display transform display selection handle. So I want to see these kind of starburst looking, selection handles here. And I'm just going to check my cluster movement. So there's my cluster moving. So that's working. My inner cluster is moving, and my outer cluster is moving. But I'm actually, before we go any further, I just want to smooth some of those weights because right now everything's moving at 100%. So I'm going to take each of those clusters and do a quick smooth on it. So I'm going to select the head, go to deform, come down into the paint weight section, paint clusters here, and options. And I'm going to switch this into smooth, and I'm just going to flood it a whole bunch of times. And then this is where we change it. So inner brow, whole bunch of flooding, and then mid brow, whole bunch of flooding. Now that's just the start. It's like anything else when we paint weights. I'm going to do a quick, just to kind of massage it a little bit in place. Nowhere near done. Once we've done the rig, if we were going to complete this, we'd complete the controls and then do some range of motion keyframes and then tweak the weights from that. So, but this is just a start, just so it's not quite so rough. And then now when I come back in and move this, you'll see that it's moving a bit softer, which is what we want. And then we can adjust each of these like however we need to, right, to kind of offset. So it's actually not doing too bad, right? Like it's moving in a not too shabby-ish sort of way. All right. Okay. So we've got our clusters in, we've painted the weights, we've got our master nodes in, and now we're ready to go to the next step. Right. So we want these master nodes to move when we make our sneer. You see how they're all sitting there static and they're not reacting to the blend shaping. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this command up here, the point on poly command. I can't remember where I got this rig from, but that's what they do. Probably not my favorite way to do this because of some counter animation issues that we'll have to deal with in a minute, but we'll use this point on poly. It's convenience, easy. The issue with it though is you need to have UVs because the point on poly is going to take its positioning of this vert from the UV coordinates, not from world space coordinates of each of these vertices. So what we need to do is check our UVs on this head before we do the point on poly constraint. And if I want to do that, I got to switch into modeling, and then I'm going to go to my UV menu and open the UV editor. And in the UV editor, you can see we have a mess here. So let's just shrink this down and then zoom this up. So I want all the UVs to fit in this 0 to 1 space. The issue, of course, is that the UVs are a mess. So I'm going to take the head here. It's selected. I'm going to go to UV, and I'm just going to do a cylindrical map. And that's going to pretty much lay it out what I want. Except I'm going to grab these red handles on either side, doesn't matter which one, and I'm just going to drag this projection so that it's closed on the back. And that's what's going to shrink all of this into the 0 to 1 space. And then we've got a little hook action here and another one on the mouth bag. And that's what these UVs that are sticking outside the 0 to 1 space are. So I'm just going to bring those in. We could just, go to vertex and grab them, hit W, and move them in. And it's going to work because for our rig, we're only going to put controls on the brows, and we do have good UVs there. But in reality, what I would rather do is I'd grab this edge, and then under my menu here, the cut and sew menu, just say move and sew. And that's going to stop the hook from happening, and you'll see that it cleans up the UVs. So same thing here on the mouth bag that's underneath. What I might do is I might take this edge and I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to cut that open, and then I'm going to take these 3 here and then do a move and so. And you can see that cleans up that UV section as well. So either way, but it's not really a UV class, right? We're not doing texturing or surfacing, but I do want to have flat UVs for the eyebrows. It's required for the point on poly constraint we're going to use in this specific setup. There's other ways to do on face controls. Just the one that I happen to find that probably the easiest one uses this point on poly. All right, anyway, enough blah blah. Back into object mode. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to pick the vertex right underneath that controller and then select the control selecting the outliner, and then I'm going to go to deform and I'm going to say, sorry, I'm going to go to deform. I'm going to go back into rigging and then I'm going to go constraint and I'm going to say point on poly constraint. And then I'm going to select the next vert and the mid brow, and I'll just hit G and it'll redo my last action, and that was a point on poly constraint. And then my outer one and my outer master node and G will redo my last action, point on poly constraint. So back in object mode, and then what we'll see now is when I do the sneer, you can see the selection handles, which are the nulls, they're moving. So I'm getting these to, they're basically sticking to that vertex or UV position on the head. So that's working. That's what we want to do. And then now we can build our sort of rig on top of this. So what we'll do is I'm going to create a control to put into place here, and I'm just going to use this box icon. You probably lost all your icons and what I assume because people refuse to use the batch file. But anyway, if you need the script to create one of these control cubes, you can find it in my faculty folder in the outbox. And in the outbox, we have this control cube text. So if I highlight that, or sorry, double click it, then I'm just going to highlight this, copy it. What? It keeps blinking. I'm going to go into my script editor. No, hang on. I don't know what's going on with Windows. Ridiculous operating system. All right, so I've got the script editor open, and I'm just going to paste in my little 3-command script to create a polycube. So I'll run it, hit play to execute it, or enter on the number pad. There it is down here. I want it to move on all 3 axes. And then I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to snap it to the same point. So V, middle mouse, oops, I missed, there it is. Obviously much too large, so let's scale that down. You know, and if you want, you stick out a bit more, you can scale it a bit. And then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move the next one over to the next vert, duplicate that, and move it over to the next vert. Now what we could do is, well, I'm not going to bother. All right. So each of these needs to now have history deleted and freeze transformations, and then we can name them. So this is inner brow control, and this one is mid brow control, and this one is outer brow control. Okay, and the way this works is when I move this controller, I want to move the cluster, but we want to give the animator the option of rotating and scaling and everything. So I'm going to use the connection editor. I'm going to select my inner brow control, go into my channel box, open up my connection editor, and then that's going to be automatically loaded here on the left, and then on the right is the cluster. So inner cluster, and then I'm just going to find the translates, rotates, and scales. There 4. So translate to translate, and rotate to rotate, and scale to scale. And then we just keep doing them. So the next bit's going to be mid-brow control on the left, mid-brow cluster on the right, translate to translate, and rotate to rotate, and scale to scale. And the last outer brow control on the left, outer brow cluster on the right, translate to translate, and rotate to rotate, and scale to scale. And I can close that, and what I should get now is when the cluster moves. Now we are getting a little bit of a weird, right? You can see how this is moving further than the actual object. So that's a bit of a problem. So what we're going to do is on top of this control, I'm going to do 2 groups. So I'm going to go Control G, and I'm going to have 2 groups above my inner brow cluster. So first of all, when I do this, you can see that the control doesn't move. The master node moves, but not the controller. So we need the controller to move. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just name this. So inner brow, and this is going to be our, get out of the way, inner brow counter. And this is going to be inner brow position. POS. So the position group allows the controller to move with the point on poly constraint. So I'm going to take my inner brow position and just parent it into my inner brow master, because remember it's the inner brow master that's actually moving. So what that'll do now is when I move my blend shape, that vertex moves, point on poly constraint moves the master node, and the master node, because I've parented the position underneath it, is also moving. But when I translate it forward, I'm getting this double transformation now, like it's even worse. And what's happening here is I am moving the control, and that control is moving this cluster, and that cluster, because we've got this point on poly constraint, is moving this point, and that point is a parent of this control, so it moves the control. So I move the control, which moves the cluster, which moves the master, which moves the control. So I'm getting a sort of a bit of a cyclical kind of redundancy thing going on here. So let's fix that by using this counter node. So if you imagine I move this X units out, if I then take the counter node, oops, I need to center the pivot on that, and I move that back, it's going to look like it's stuck. So that's really effectively what's happening here. So I'm going to take, actually, I think I forgot to do this. I'm going to take each of these 2 and center the pivot on them. Okay, so that I need to do that for all of them, so I may as well go Control G for the mid brow. So this is my mid brow counter and my mid brow POS, and then where's my outer brow control? Mid brow control, outer brow control, Control G, expand that. This is outer brow counter and outer brow POS. So I'll just parent those each in. So mid-brow POS to the mid-brow master, and the outer brow POS to the outer brow master. And then we need to work this counter node. So I'll start with the inner brow. So first of all, I need a multiply divide node. So you can do this in the Hypershade, but I'm just going to go into my mel line here at the bottom, and I'm going to type create capital N node. And I'm going to create a multiply divide, and it's case sensitive and no spaces, so lowercase multiply, capital D divide. Enter, result is multiply divide node. I can't see it in my outliner until I turn off DAG only, and then if I scroll, there it is. There's a multiply divide node. So this is going to be inner brow multiply divide. I'm going to duplicate that twice. Duplicates go to the bottom of the outliner. So this is going to be mid brow multiply divide. And this is going to be outer brow multiply divide. And then if we want them all together, you just have to close the outliner, reopen the outliner, and then they should all show up like together alphabetically. So inner brow multiply divide, mid brow, and outer brow multiply divide. So each of these, I'm going to just select all three of them. I want the input 2x's to all be -1. So how we're going to work this is whatever value we put in here is coming from our control, and we're going to multiply this value by -1, which is going to give us the opposite, and then we're going to plug the output into the counter. So if I move the control 5 units forward, the multiply divide will multiply 5 by -1 and give me -5, and then I will put that on the counter node, and the counter node will move backwards -5. So as I'm pulling this control forward 5, the node above it, the parent node, is moving backwards at exactly the same rate and speed. And so it's going to look like the control is stuck to the surface, but in reality it's actually moving forward and then moving back, but 60 times a second, so it looks smooth. Right, anyway, connection editor. So there's the control, and there's edit, there's the connection editor. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to split my outliner so I can see up and down here, and then that's going to allow me to grab these controllers. Let's just go, there we go. So this is my inner brow control. This is my inner brow multiply divide, and it's going to be translate to input 1. And I'm just going to reload them as we go. So then it's going to be mid brow control, mid brow multiply divide, translates to input 1. And then the last one's going to be the outer brow multiply divide and the outer brow control, and it's translate to input 1. And then I'm going to take the inner brow multiply divide and load that on the left, and then I'm going to take my inner brow counter node, load that on the left, and it's going to be output to translate. And then just keep repeating that. So mid brow on the left, multiply divide node on the left, mid brow counter on the right, output to translate, and the last one is outer brow multiply divide, outer brow counter on the right, output to translate. Okay, and then we'll just check it. So what I should be able to do is grab this control, and now it looks like it's stuck to the surface. If I grab this one, it's stuck to the surface, and if I grab this one, right, it's stuck to the surface. And if I turn on my motion, and then I say, you know what, I don't want that to be maybe quite so down, and then this one goes up a little bit, and that one goes like over and up. So I can kind of get this one down and in, and then this one can kind of stay up. So you can key the positions of the controls while also getting some automation from this controller. So select them, zero out the positions, put them back, and then I don't need to see the clusters, so I'm going to select my clusters. I'm going to hide them now that it's working, and I don't need to see these selection handles, so I'm going to select the selection handles, which is going to select the master nodes. And then the way this works is I'm going to go to display, transform display, selection handles, which is a toggle, and turns them off. And then each of these controls, just so they stand out a little bit, I'm going to go to display, drawing overrides, enable overrides, and I don't know, for simplicity's sake, I'll just make them red, enable, and then red. And then over here, enable and red. And there we have it. Inner brow controls more or less ready to work. Now we'd have to tweak the weights, and we have to finish the weights and finish the rig and all that stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, the rig is done. We've kind of walked through everything, so there you have it.